The Prudent Engraver in Willa Cather's book, O Pioneers, by Mary McCulley, read by Sarah Levesque. After doing a close reading of several passages from Willa Cather's book, O Pioneers, with my college literature class, students eagerly try to guess my theory on who the narrator of the story might be. It never fails that one student will say, quote, "Whoever the narrator is, they must be in love with Alexandra," end quote. The story follows the life of Alexandra Bergstrom, a steadfast, driven Nebraskan pioneer woman whose nurturing of the wild land brings abundance in return. But it is not the central figure who intrigues me the most. I have become convinced that Cather's most artistic character, the quiet, angsty Carl Ludstrom, is the voice behind the limited, omniscient narration in this tragic yet hopeful love story. I use this speculation to engage my students, who may be initially reluctant to immerse themselves in the pages of narration that wind and wander over the expanse of the Nebraska prairie. They would sooner skip forward to the passages that detail the passionate yet imprudent love story between the youthful Marie and Emile. The task of slowly and carefully observing the narration, though, gives readers time to mine the truer love stories. Nearly every time they read the text, students are divided over Carl. He has returned to the Nebraska Divide coincidentally, after Alexandra has become the most successful landowner in the region. He, on the other hand, has spent the last 16 years trying to make it as an engraver in Chicago, but his profession has gone out of style. Students, who themselves are eagerly expecting early professional success, become suspicious of Carl. Is he coming back to take advantage of Alexandra's wealth? Is he lazy? Is he just a failed, washed-up artist? If Carl is indeed the narrator, as I propose, I feel that these responses to his character reveal how culture mistakes the understanding of prudence and success. Alexandra's story shows them what they want to see. She worked hard, took risks, and ended up wealthy. The American dream. Of course, the book conveniently leaves out the many years she struggled through debt. Carl, however, left the land with his family when he was only a boy, because they gave up on the pioneer dream. He spent years chasing after a profession that yielded no financial boon. In many students' eyes, he has squandered his life. But as we see at the end of the text, Carl's value lies in his understanding of others, and his slow, methodical tending of friendship and love. It is this love and friendship that Alexandra realizes means more to her than all the wealth in the world. If indeed we can read the narration as Carl's voice, we see the narrator not celebrating himself, but extolling the daring Alexandra. His gaze is often followed by one of the tableaux vivants, or still pictures of Alexandra. Quote, "Carl came quietly and slowly up the garden path, looking intently at Alexandra. She did not hear him. She was standing perfectly still, with that serious ease so characteristic of her. Her thick, reddish braids, twisted about her head, fairly burned in the sunlight. The air was cool enough to make the warm sun pleasant on one's back and shoulders, and so clear that the eye could follow a hawk up and up into the blazing blue depths of the sky." End quote. Though Carl's engraving skills failed to secure him financial wealth, his ability to observe and honor others captures intangible riches of love. We see these ekphrastic passages or engravings of Alexandra throughout the text, indicating his skill in unearthing the riches of the natural world for the reader, alongside the dazzling portrait of the pioneer woman. Scholars have often noted that Alexandra seems unlikely to fully understand herself, even though she is such an esteemed protagonist. The text describes her heart as if it were, quote, hiding down, quote, in the earth, connected but unable to express that connection. It pictures, quote, her mind as a white book with clear writing about the weather and beasts and growing things. Not many people would have cared to read it, only a happy few, end quote. But the narrator is obviously among the happy few, for it is only through the narration that Alexandra's thoughts, her love, and thus her story become transcribed and accessible. The artistic narrator, again, who I believe is Carl, becomes the scribe that pulls the pulsing of the main character's heart into words and song. Quote, "The chirping of the insects down in the long grass had been like the sweetest music, with the quail and the plover and all the little wild things that crooned or buzzed in the sun." End quote. As an artist, Carl self-consciously shrugs off praise for his art when Alexandra displays his watercolor sketches on her parlor walls. He embarrassedly claims that these were, quote, "done for amusement," end quote, and that he simply sent them to Alexandra to remind her of him, quote, "not because they were good," end quote. But despite his self-depreciation, no one can deny that Carl is an astute observer. Everywhere he goes, he is looking. When he spies Alexandra after returning from his 16-year absence, he again paints a picture that could only come from an observant admirer. Quote, "Her figure is fuller, and she has more color. She seems sunnier and more vigorous than she did as a young girl. But she has the same calmness and deliberation of manners, the same clear eyes, and she still wears her hair in 2 braids wound round her head. It is so curly that fiery ends escape from the braids and make her head look like one of the big double sunflowers that fringes her vegetable garden. But where her collar falls away from her neck, or where her sleeves are pushed back from her wrist, the skin is of such smoothness and whiteness as none but Swedish women ever possess, skin with the freshness of snow itself." End quote. Carl's slow, prudent friendship exists in sharp contrast to Emile's passionate love for Marie. Spoiler. After Marie's jealous husband Frank shoots Marie and Emile under the mulberry tree when he finds them in their night of illicit love, Alexandra blames herself for not seeing their passion unfold before her. She becomes despondent and weary at the senselessness of it all. In the end, Carl returns to Alexandra to be her shoulder of emotional support. If we are careful readers, we would not hastily judge his wisdom and prudence based on immediate success or lack thereof. The story of Carl's artistic career parallels his patient tree watering as a young man. Tucked away in the middle of the narrative, we learn that when he and Alexandra were young, they had purchased apricot seeds to plant. For years and years, Carl kept the trees alive, quote, "watering them with his own back," end quote. Like the growth of the trees, his love story took time, cultivation, and persistence. The trees for years did not bear observable fruit, just as Carl's engravings yielded little financial reward. But one day, when the time was ripe, he returned, and the apricots had blossomed alongside his and Alexandra's love. He waited for what he could not see. In the end, he is the quiet, circumspect hero, the one who allows Alexandra to finally rest from her labors and grief in his offer of friendship. He helps her understand herself and her story while laying aside his own importance. In my eyes, this is success.